Back to the Bayside Leadership Development Podcast, helping you take your leadership to the next level. So last podcast, we talked all about exchange, the exchange that happens between a leader and the follower, and how these exchanges actually build special relationships. So what ends up happening is that a leader over time will create an unintentional team. So let me tell you what I mean by this. When you have a group of followers, let's say you have 8. And let's say 4 of those 8, you guys click on all cylinders. You are absolutely 100% amazing all the time. You meet with them, they get you, they understand what you're talking about. In fact, they even go above and beyond and take on extra responsibility, just like we talked about in the last video. They are just absolute rock stars. And then you think about the other 4 people on your team and you go, I'm not even sure we speak the same language. Really, guys, this will happen in every leader-follower relationship. I call them unintentional teams because we don't set out as leaders to build a divided ministry or to build divided teams. What we set out to build is we set out to build a massive team, but what ends up happening is because of your natural inclination and your traits and your wiring and your chemistry, you get along with some people better than others. And let me tell you guys, that's okay. So don't beat yourself up. That's okay. You're naturally going to connect with some people better than others. However, the Bible talks about favoritism being forbidden. And so we have to be able to go, okay, if the book of James says favoritism is forbidden, then what do I do with my in-group and what do I do with my not so in? What do I do with my in-group and my not so in-group? See, the in-group understands you. They get you. You guys click, but the out-group, like, what do we even do with them? See, here's this whole idea behind leader and member exchange, the relationship that happens. The whole goal behind this idea is to go, okay, how do we get the in-group to open up so that people in the out-group can come in and their cultures can ascend the in-group? So guys, let me give you an example of this that I hate admitting, but I've done this. So a while back, I was a lead coach over men's small groups. And I was in the process of building a small group ministry, specifically 4 guys. And I had raised up 6 coaches. I almost did 7, 6 coaches. And so on the world, I would start saying a sentence and they would finish the sentence. I would think, hey, we should talk to this person. And they would tell me, hey, I just got a hold of this person. And, we had lunch and coffee and it was great. They're going to lead a small group. And for half of my group, it was awesome. Guys, this is textbook classic scenario. These guys were absolutely amazing. I had my other 3 coaches that I kind of had a tough time with. Honestly, it was really difficult for me because it started out good. And then over time, I realized when we were having our one-on-ones, we just weren't connecting. I would say something, they would leave, I'd follow up, nothing would have happened. And it was just strictly bizarre. And what I found is that our core philosophy, our approaches to leading men's small groups were different. Myself and my in-group, we said, build relationships first, build a small group habit into your guys' schedules, figure out what times they can come, and once they get used to coming, they won't leave. Spiritual growth will happen afterwards. And it might be small at first, but it'll happen over time. Then we can go into intentionally teaching, training, raising them up, all of that. This other group, my not so in group, they approach things completely opposite. They said, what content do we need? What information do guys need? What events do they need in order for them to grow and develop? And oh yeah, maybe we'll find some relationships along the way. Guys, even just based on my reaction right there, I'm still working through it, I guess. But what ended up happening from our philosophy and what I had unintentionally done is I started favoring my in-group and distancing my not so in-group. And guys, we can't do that. We have to provide a unified team. And so once I realized that this happened, I started praying about it, talking to God about it, doing monthly coach huddles. And these coach huddles, we only did 2 things. So the first thing was we prayed for a half an hour and everybody had to pray. Each one of my, so now these guys were all praying together and they were hearing the prayers of one another. There's something about prayer that unifies people like crazy. The second thing that we did was we sat down and we talked about what are we doing for the next month, short term. What are we doing for the next month? And I would kick off the conversation, but I would let these guys take it from there. And here's what ended up happening. My guys began talking to one another and we realized where some of the holes were in our team. So my in-group guys, they began opening up and going, you know what, I think it's time for us to start intentionally teaching and training our people a little bit better, a little bit differently. And my not quite as in guys, they said, you know what, we might need to put a little bit more emphasis in the relationship building, because they might be able to pick the greatest content in the world, but if people don't show up, then frankly, it's useless. It's very similar to our trait and our skills theory that we talked about earlier in this podcast of going, you can be the most natural born leader and you can be the most highly trained leader, but if you don't actually lead people, then it's useless. It was the exact same concept. And to integrate, and the in-group and the not so in-group all became the in-group, and they all began working together. And yeah, there's still all kinds of stuff that we need to work through and think through, but this is a textbook example of what happens when a leader builds individual relationships with people. We will naturally begin to favor others, some above others. But what we need to do, we as leaders, we have to take the responsibility of unifying our team, of creating a cohesive team. And so that's on us. And so guys, I want to encourage you, if you find these unintentional teams forming inside of your ministry, address it. Take the time, find a way to unify the team and bring them back together. Because honestly, guys, if we are not unifying the church, then what are we doing? What are we doing? So thank you guys so much for listening to this leadership podcast. Thank you for taking your leadership to the next level. I will talk to you on our next podcast. See ya.